2 weeks after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, a story emerged that a 10-year-old rape victim had to travel across state lines from Ohio to Indiana in order to access safe and legal abortion care. Many were outraged. It became an early flashpoint in the post-Roe fight for abortion rights that highlighted the complexity and cruelty of the Supreme Court's decision. The story of the 10-year-old girl came from Dr. Caitlin Bernard, the Indianapolis-based doctor who performed the abortion. She first told the story to the Indy Star, a local news outlet, which published it without identifying the patient beyond her age and the state in which she lived. The story caught the attention of Indiana's Republican Attorney General Todd Rokita, who began investigating Dr. Bernard, her medical partner, and their practice. That story has largely faded from the headlines, but it was only the beginning of an ongoing conflict between the doctor and the Attorney General. Just this week, Rokita asked Indiana's Medical Licensing Board to discipline Dr. Bernard, alleging that she broke the law in telling the girl's story and not reporting the abuse to authorities in Indiana, even though it was reported to the prior authorities in Ohio, who subsequently arrested the man suspected of raping the young girl. To counter Rokita's investigation, Dr. Bernard filed a lawsuit last month to protect her patient's privacy and to prevent the Attorney General's office from retrieving private medical records. But yesterday, State Judge Heather Welsh ruled that Rokita's investigation can continue because now it's in the hands of the state's Medical Licensing Board. But she also chastised the Attorney General for making public statements about the case that were, quote, clearly unlawful breaches that requires him to maintain confidentiality over pending investigations. Investigations of abortion providers by state officials is nothing new. Similar probes and violations of patient privacy occurred in Kansas in the 2000s when Phil Klein, the state's overzealous attorney general, used his office to scrutinize abortion providers. He was reprimanded for his unethical tactics, and his law license was even suspended indefinitely in Kansas. Abortion is still legal in Indiana for now. Court-ordered injunctions have blocked the state's abortion ban from taking effect, but the Attorney General's actions clearly signal that the state and its executives remain hostile toward abortion providers and toward patients who are seeking abortion care. Joining me now is Kathleen Sebelius. She previously served as the Secretary of Health and Human Services during the Obama administration. But importantly for this discussion, she's a former governor of Kansas. Kathleen, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us this morning. I just want to make sure we start in the right place here, and that is state hostility toward abortion providers has serious consequences, some of which are scaring abortion providers away, making abortions unavailable in states where it's even legal because abortion providers are fearful. But it's also resulted in harm and sometimes death to those abortion providers.
That's true. And we've seen all of the above in Kansas. We have seen state officials use their positions in an attempt to circumvent really the law and chill the opportunities for women to access the care they need. We've seen abortion providers attacked initially and then murdered. Dr. Tiller in Wichita was murdered here in Kansas by a zealot who believed that he was fighting a war on behalf of children in America and found it appropriate to go into a church and murder a healthcare provider who he disagreed with. So we've had an attorney general who was disbarred because he confiscated abortion records. We've seen a whole array of really outrageous activities up to and including murder.
In fact, when you were the governor of Kansas, you vetoed a bill that would have required doctors to provide additional information about patients who were seeking abortions. And you said that the bill would, quote, lead to the intimidation of health care providers and reduce access to comprehensive health care for women, even when it is necessary to preserve their lives and health. So this effort to get to intimidate both abortion providers and recipients of reproductive health care is nothing new. And you at the time realized the danger of what the Attorney General in Indiana is trying to do right now by both intimidating the abortion provider, the doctor who provided the abortion, and people who are seeking abortions.
Well, we have had, Allie, sort of the battle over very zealous abortion protection for years in Kansas. We had the so-called Summer of Mercy in the mid 1900s, where we had thousands of people congregate in Wichita, Kansas, and surround a clinic, and not only surround the clinic, and that's become more common practice. It was a little unusual at the time, But what I saw up close and personal was the staff of that clinic, healthcare providers, doctors and nurses, and clinicians who were tracked to their homes, who were literally terrorized in grocery stores, and their kids were leafleted at schools. And this was an element of terror, really, trying to force individuals to shut down what was a legal practice of providing women with desperately needed care. We watched the patients be tortured and terrified as they tried to access that care, being screamed at, and cars being. Now, some of the laws now exist to provide some perimeter protection and provide some additional support, but this is another avenue where individuals are going to use their authority as attorney general, as governors, as legislators to try and stand between women and their right to access health care.
So I'm curious, because when you look at the results of the ballot measure in Kansas, which, by the way, ended up being repeated several times in the midterm elections, both from people who were trying to protect abortion rights or who were trying to eliminate them. No problem. You know, what a lot of Americans who don't necessarily outwardly support abortion rights are finding is that this overreach by attorneys general and governors, particularly those who are trying to make an example of abortion providers or direct terror toward them, is not something a lot of Americans who otherwise would not be considering the option of abortions or not really like the idea. They're reacting to this, what you're just talking about, the idea that these are draconian, medieval, measures of control over women.
Well, it's you're right. I think the vast majority of Americans find these tactics very frightening. And the idea that we would, in a health system where we know we have a limited number of providers anyway, where we want the providers to have the best training possible, where you want any patient to be able to access an array of care, what we're hearing from women is that in this effort to really chill the opportunity for women to access abortion care, they are also discouraging doctors from giving appropriate care following a miscarriage, or treating women who are bleeding heavily because they're terrified, or having lawyers in a hospital visit a woman instead of a doctor. I mean, that is a horrific place for healthcare to be for women in America. And it's really being led by this very zealous effort to prevent women from accessing the care they need.
Kathleen Sebelius, always good to talk to you about this. Thank you. Your wealth of experience helps us analyze these things more fully than we could without you. Kathleen Sebelius is the former Secretary of Health and Human Services during the Obama administration, also the former governor of Kansas.